Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Blue Dog Whisperer. I'm Evan Grollman, and I hope you're having a fantastic Sunday. On today's episode, I'm going to be discussing why Bernie Sanders is a fraud, and I'm going to explain my reasoning for that. So, I was just watching Meet the Press, and Senator Joe Manchin from West Virginia, the most conservative Democrat in the United States Senate, was on, and he was discussing this bipartisan bill, which he and Mitt Romney worked on, and it's also been endorsed by Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi. And this bill, it's a $908 billion package, and a lot of it is going towards small businesses. Some of it is also going towards schools, public education. Some of it's going to vaccine distribution and unemployment. The bill, the majority of this bill is really solid. Obviously, concessions had to be made because it's bipartisan, but this bill is what is really needed, and it is a starting point. And Joe Manchin has admitted that. Joe Biden's admitted that. Pretty much every Democrat has admitted that. And you know who's not going to be voting for this bill? Bernie Sanders. And Bernie Sanders is not voting for this bill because he says it doesn't go far enough. Here's the thing, though. The Republicans still have control of the United States Senate. And we are not going to be getting, Democrats are not going to be getting a one-party bill through with Republican control. That's simply not going to happen. Mitch McConnell is against this bipartisan bill. So the extremes are not really happy with this bill, which as a moderate, my rule of thumb usually is if the far left isn't happy with it and the far right isn't happy with it, but the middle is happy with it, it's probably worth doing. Now, I think that Bernie Sanders is a fraud because he is letting perfect be the enemy of good, and he is someone who is very wealthy. He got wealthy off of capitalism, and yet he is the biggest socialist in the United States Senate, and possibly, I don't know about in Washington entirely because you have Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who I cannot stand, but Bernie Sanders has three houses. He is very fortunate. He's very wealthy, and yet he's going to vote against a bill which will sustain us until maybe March or April. And he's doing this out of ideological pureness. So this begs the question, what do progressives see in Bernie Sanders? He talks a very good game, but he's like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. He's more of a mouthpiece than anything else. Maybe he works harder than AOC, I'm not sure. But unfortunately, he just doesn't do a very good job. What has he done in Washington? He's been in Washington. He's been a congressman for decades, and he's been a senator for about 13 years. And I'm still trying to figure out what he's actually done. If you go to the GovTrack website, you'll see that Bernie Sanders has only written or passed the bills that he's written. Only a few have passed, and I'm not sure what progressives see in the senator from Vermont. But what I see is a man who is a phony. I see a man whose supporters, a lot of whom have Stockholm Syndrome and believe that he's the greatest thing since sliced bread. I see a man who encourages the worst in people. I think Bernie Sanders in many ways is like a socialist Trump because he promises all these great things and hardly delivers. And I'm sure that if the Young Turks or any other progressive channel were to watch this, I'm sure that they would probably scold me or mean tweet me. That is, if they cared, which I doubt they do. But I just think that when we have someone in Washington who claims to care about the working people and the working poor, and he has the opportunity to do something to help those people, sustain the lives of these people, and he chooses not to do it because it doesn't live up to his standards, that's someone who is a fraud and a phony. Plain and simple. And I think that we need to understand that there are many people, as Blue Dogs, we need to understand that there are many people who we cannot have a conversation with in the progressive left because they are true believers. They don't want to. They call us fake Democrats, yet Bernie is voting against something that would actually help people. This bill was worked on by Joe Manchin and Mitt Romney. It was a bipartisan effort, um, and I think that the majority of this bill is very good. So, what can we learn from this? Number one, we can learn that no matter what we say, a lot of Bernie supporters will see this as Bernie uh, being true to himself and being true to his ideology. But unfortunately, there are some points where you have to compromise and you have to put aside some of your, I don't want to say your beliefs, because you should never put aside your beliefs, but you have to sort of, I want to say, prioritize. You got to prioritize and figure out what's important to you and what isn't. And Bernie has never been capable of doing that. If you go to the Lugar Center, they released recently, in the last few months, they released a list of the most bipartisan senators, a list of from 1 to 100, in order of 1 being the most bipartisan and 100 being the least bipartisan. Bernie is the least bipartisan senator, and which is interesting because he's an independent, and there's a cliche that independents love bipartisanship. So that begs another question. Why is Bernie Sanders not a Democrat? His supporters seem to think that they speak for Democrats, yet they supported someone who isn't a Democrat. And I have to question why that's the case. It's because Bernie is not a Democrat in terms of registration or even ideology. Ideology. I'm sorry, and I think that he may stump for Democratic candidates. He may do all those things, but there has to be a reason why he refuses to be a team player and actually register with the party. And I'm someone who puts my country over my party. I've always done that. But I think that his supporters are being played big time because they act as though they speak for the entire party, and they're the ones who are sort of McCarthy lights. They're trying to find who doesn't belong in the party and bully them online. And in the end, I mean, that's what they do. That's what a lot of these Bernie bots do. And I think that we need to work on that as a party. So there will be a lot of people who, no matter what evidence you provide, they're a lot like some of these Trump supporters. No matter what evidence you provide, they're still going to believe that Bernie Sanders is a god, and they're going to see him as fighting the good fight, even though he is fortunate and has nothing to lose from this pandemic, and he's basically telling the people who voted him in, screw you. That's essentially what it is. So that's why I think Bernie Sanders is a fraud, and that's why I think that he is not a team player. He's not bipartisan. He's not a Democrat. He's just a radical. I think that he's sympathetic to communism. The fact that he praised Fidel Castro for the literacy program, here's the thing. His supporters twisted that to mean, well, he was praising literacy programs, he wasn't praising communism. But I'm sure that there are other places in the world that have implemented literacy programs, and he could have chosen from any one of those, and I'm sure some of them would not have been communist countries. Why did he choose to praise Fidel Castro for the literacy program? The answer is because he is sympathetic to communism, and I honestly don't think that Bernie Sanders would mind living in a communist country. I really don't. And I think that some of his supporters, deep down, are communists. I really do believe that. If they're not socialists, they are sympathetic to communism, just like he is. They resent anyone who has benefited from America, and they want to dismantle the entire system and break down the Democratic Party. And I think that if 12% of Bernie's supporters in 2016 crossed the aisle to vote for the most corrupt president in history, and it's not just 12% of people who didn't vote for Hillary Clinton in 2016. It's also Bernie supporters who wrote in Bernie Sanders, voted for Jill Stein, or didn't vote whatsoever, that really caused us to be in this predicament. And I think that that's terribly unfortunate that we have people who act as though they own the party and yet will do the exact opposite of what they say that Democrats should do. I think it's really unfortunate, and I think that it's glaring hypocrisy, and it's an example of what I resent about the progressive left. You cannot lecture me and my fellow Blue Dogs about being a team player when you decided to vote for Donald Trump because he was anti-establishment. Just goes to show you how these Bernie supporters are such ideologues and such hypocrites and are intellectually lazy. So many of them are probably low information voters, and they probably just want to. I mean, they actually. I don't think they understood how big of a crook Donald Trump was. And all one had to do to know that Trump was a crook was look at the New York Republican primary from 2016, when it was a three-person race between Donald Trump, John Kasich, and Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz didn't carry a single county in New York. Donald Trump carried all the counties in New York except for Manhattan, which went to John Kasich. Manhattan is where they do business, a lot of Wall Street Republicans, and they did not trust Trump with their future. Had they done just a little bit of research and seen that, they would have realized that Trump is no good. But they didn't. So that's their intellectual laziness, plain and simple. Or they just didn't care. Oh well. Enjoy your Sunday.